All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Some days I walk, some days I crawl, some days I can't feel much at all. My body's a maze that I try to read. Every step forward, a silent need. But I won't let this break who I am. I've learned how to fight, learned how to stand. I may fall, but still I rise. Through the pain, through the tears in my eyes. This road is long, but it's mine to tread. With every sunrise, I lift my head. I won't be defined by what I can't do. Still I rise, and I always will too. There's fire in nerves, fog in my mind, but love still holds me, gentle and kind. I count every victory, no matter how small. Even standing still can feel 10 feet tall. This storm may shake the ground beneath, but it won't steal my soul, my belief. I may fall, but still I rise. Through the doubt, through the world's quiet sighs, I keep moving. Others might freeze with heartbeats of thunder and legs in the breeze. I won't be erased by what I go through. Still I rise. Every day something new. There are days when the dark feels too wide, but I've got my people here by my side. They don't need to fix what they can't see. Just walk through the shadows with me. I may bend, but I don't break. Even when the ground feels like a quake, there's more to me than this disease. I am hope, I am strength, I am peace. So let the wind howl, let the storm brew. Still I rise, still I rise.
And good evening, one and all, and welcome back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we'll cross this time-space continuum that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. The X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday, right here on the CanCom Broadcast Network and your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM. They not only broadcast us on 1220 AM throughout southern Ontario and the northern tiers of the state of New York and Pennsylvania, but they also stream us around the world on your hometown on classic1220.ca. If you would like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, and on social media sites, xzoneradiotv. Well, there's nothing behind the dot. It's just X-Zone Radio TV. My producer tonight, as always, is the one and only Craig West in Master Control. Always nice working with you, Craig. What's this, year 36 together? My Lord, 95% of marriages don't last this long, pal. Like I said, always great working with you. X-Zone Nation, tonight's guest is an award-winning playwright, author, and creator whose work takes us deep into the shadowy territory where psychological suspense, supernatural horror, and disturbing reality collide. Tim Mulligan is the creative force behind Mulligan World and the acclaimed Witchland universe, a 5-part graphic novel series inspired by the unsettling history surrounding Washington State's Hanford nuclear site. Through stories including Witchland, Snitchland, Twitchland, Ditchland, and the forthcoming Switchland, Tim explores government secrecy, radioactive contamination, unexplained phenomenon, human mutation, and the frightening consequences of truths left behind. His creative work also includes the stage thrillers Witchland, Point Loma, and Pig Butchered, each examining fear, deception, moral ambiguity, and the darker edges of human nature. Tonight we're going to journey into Tim's imagination, uncover the real story behind his fictional universe, and explore the uneasy boundary separating science, superstition, conspiracy, and nightmare. His website is www.mulliganworld.com. And X-Zone Nation, please welcome to the show Tim Mulligan. And Tim, welcome to the X-Zone.
Hey Rob, it's good to be back on the show. I was on it, I think, with my last book, and it's fun to come talk to you.
Well, it's great having you back with us. And how are things in Palm Springs, California tonight?
It's good. It's hot. You know, I'm lucky. I go back and forth between Palm Springs and San Diego, so it's not a bad life. But it's just pretty warm these days.
So tell us, Tim, for the listeners who may not have had the opportunity of being with us the last time, since we've grown substantially over the months and years here in the X-Zone. Could you can you tell us what inspired you to become a writer?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. I just started writing late in life. So I have a full-time job. I'm a lawyer. I've been in human resources for a long, long time. And it was during COVID when I was home, quarantining like the rest of the world, that I thought, at a ripe young age of 55, that I would start my hand at something I've always wanted to do, which was tell some stories about my hometown, which is where the Hanford nuclear site is. And so I just thought I'd write a scary play about my time growing up there. And that's what birthed Witchland, the first story. And since then, that was 2020. Since then, I just can't stop writing. I've written, 4 plays now, and several have gone on to New York, and now I have this series of graphic novels. And so it's really something that's blossomed late in life, but now it's opened up a whole new world to me that I just love.
Well, congratulations, and it's never too late in this lifetime, is it?
I agree. Yep.
Were you fascinated by mysteries, supernatural stories, and psychological horror as a child?
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of the horror genre. Mm-hmm. I like scary things. I especially am drawn to, scary or supernatural stories that have a modicum of truth to them. So, something based on a real place or a real situation that then maybe, got fictionalized or depicted in pop culture. So yeah, I would say as a young kid, I've always loved creative writing. I've always had a dark side, and it's what draws me to this day. And in terms of books that I read and TV shows and documentaries and things that interest me, it's usually the darker side of life.
Which writers, playwrights, or filmmakers have had the greatest influence on your storytelling?
Say it again. Who's had the greatest influence on my storytelling?
Yeah, which writers, playwrights, and filmmakers have had the greatest influence on your storytelling?
Yeah, I grew up loving Stephen King and Peter Straub. I think what started all of this was I do also love live plays and live theater. And one area that I always thought was missing in that space is a scary play. And so I think I've seen a few. I saw a stage version of The Exorcist, which didn't do much and didn't go anywhere. I saw a few other plays that have tried to do it. So that was my challenge when I started writing was, what if I could create a scary play and put it out in the universe? So I kind of really taught myself. I learned how to, I looked at the formatting of scripts, and I had so many stories about Hanford that I grew up with and in my brain that I just storyboarded this play and knocked it out. And the stories just haven't stopped since then.
How would you describe Mulligan World to someone encountering your work for the very first time?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two parts to, what I call Mulligan World. I have my plays and I have my graphic novels. The plays I have three distinct plays. They're all kind of a dark, scary play. Witchland was about my hometown and the Hanford nuclear site and the history there. I wrote a haunted house play last year that went on to win a ton of awards called Point Loma, based on a house here in San Diego that my friends own that is inhabited by some, supernatural force that I've experienced. And then my new play is about to open up in Palm Springs. It's called Pig Butchered, and that's really about the bank current trend of pig butchery bank fraud schemes, where kind of a catfishing scheme for money. So I have the plays, but I think what's really taken off is the other side of Mulligan World, which is the graphic novel series. I call it The World of Witchland, and it's really, it started with that play, and then I thought, well, I love graphic novels and comic books so much, and to really get the story out there to a broader audience, why don't I try my hand at turning it into a graphic novel? So now what you see at Mulligan World is a series of graphic novels. They all the same characters. Each story builds off the other, and it's all about, what's it like to live in this community alongside this potentially, dangerous industrial, mess and activity which is the Hanford nuclear cleanup site. And I think what really inspires me there is just this idea of, I was born and raised there. My families were born and raised there, and this idea of this kind of toxic history and the stories being passed from one generation to another, and they still continue today. And just all that comes with it, the decades of tragedy and sickness, kind of the secrets that come from government and corporations and communities that communities might want to prefer to remain buried. All that interests me. So what you'll see in Mulligan World is the couple plays that I love to write and get out there, but what you can purchase and view on your own is this series of graphic novels about Richland, Washington, or the Hanford nuclear site.
All right, Tim, we've got to take our first break. Please stand by. Explanation. Tim Mulligan is our guest, and his website is mulliganworld.com. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone, and you're listening to us around the world on the CanCom Broadcast Network and your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM, right here in St. Catharines, Ontario, and they stream us live, what you're hearing right now, around the world on classic1220.ca.
But what I can't do, still I rise, and I always will too. Some spend their lives chasing fortune and fame, building their castles, protecting a name. I chose another road beneath the open sky, following questions that money can't buy. A microphone became my window to the world, where truth and wonder slowly unfurled. Every voice, every soul, every story I knew left a little light shining through. Every interview, every page, every
Tim Mulligan is my special guest. www.mulliganworld.com is the website. And Tim, your stories frequently explore the darker side of the human nature. What attracts you to those hidden corners of the human experience?
Yeah, I think that, like I said earlier, I really am drawn to stories that are based on fact, but yet, kind of show what might be lurking underneath the surface. And so, for example, with these books, I love that, this small town, with this beautiful town that I grew up in, has all these secrets underneath it. And I think that that's what's interesting to me is you take something that's already kind of terrifying in real life and ask, what if there was an even darker story underneath it? And what might those secrets in those stories be? And that's why I think Hanford is the perfect backdrop for these stories, because there's just, people just can't believe the stories are true, what's happened out there. And it's so I'd like to kind of educate people, but also give them a fun supernatural twist on the history as well.
What did you discover about Hanford during your research that surprised you or even disturbed you the most?
Oh gosh, a lot. I mean, I was born and raised there. I didn't know a lot of the history, so it was created in the late 40s to produce plutonium for the bombs that were dropped in Nagasaki. It was this little town that was created, and the residents of the town didn't even really know what they were producing out there until after that bomb had been dropped. And so, and then from that point on, when there's kind of releases of nuclear, toxic waste in the air, and people got sick over the years, there's just been, story after story after story that you can't quite believe. Even in modern day now it's a big cleanup, multi-billion-dollar cleanup site, and there's a lot of danger there. There's 50 million plus gallons of toxic waste buried in tanks in the ground that they still don't know what to do, and they're trying to keep it from leaking and going into the Columbia River. So there's one surprise after another. I think for this book, I really, each book focuses on a different aspect of Hanford, and then I craft a story around it. This one was kind of disturbing because it was all based on, animal experiments that happened there from the late 40s all the way through the 70s. And I kind of heard about it. I knew that there was a lab out there where animal experiments were happening. I just didn't know to the extent until I did all my research. And the stories are pretty shocking.
They must be. Do you believe the history of Hanford is more frightening than any fiction writer could invent?
Well, I put it this way. When you grow up there, you don't really, it's such an interesting dichotomy because it's a beautiful town. It's on the beautiful Columbia River. It could be like an idyllic place to grow up, and you don't really hear about the illnesses and the toxicity and the danger of Hanford while you're living there. And so something they don't really talk about when you live there. But I think now that I am able to step back and do all this research and write about it, I'd say, yeah, I think it's an incredibly unusual setting for horror because the real history that's there is already strange enough, stranger than the fiction that I could write. And, with the site being so central to the Manhattan Project and the decades of nuclear weapons production and the cleanup, and now this, the things that I've uncovered about whistleblowers and, these experiments with animals and radiation. And yeah, it's a really scary story. It's even scary now for the people who are working out there and cleaning that stuff up and still getting sick. So it continues to evolve and create more, distressing stories.
How did the secrecy surrounding Hanford affect the workers, their families, and the surrounding communities, Tim?
Well, I can't speak for everybody, but I just know from my own life and my own family and my own research, the people, like I said, on one side, it's a good place to live and they pay well, and you can raise a family there and like I said, I grew up there, and I have relatives and best friends all still live there. So it's a beautiful place, but the cost of living is good and you can really have a good life. But on the flip side, You just have to know that, a few miles away is all this radiated, sludge in the ground. And so I think that there's a mix. I think the people there probably don't love talking about the danger as much. I think now it's more out in the open. Now you see New York Times sites, and a documentary came out about it last year that is now available. It's called Richland. 60 Minutes has been there a few times, but it's just, it's amazing to me that you don't hear anything about Hanford. I mean, it hasn't made its way into pop culture, I think, until my stories now. And so when I do talk about it, people think I'm making it all up. And so, I think the people that live there, to answer your question, are trying to make the most of this beautiful place, knowing that it's not that safe and it could be dangerous living and residing there.
Were residents aware of the potential danger posed by radiation and nuclear contamination?
I mean, they didn't even know. I mean, to be honest with you, in the late 40s, when they were building the bomb and producing plutonium, they weren't even telling the public and the workers what they were building it for. So I would say no. I mean, I worked out there as a high school student, as like in internships, and the dangers were never really spoken of. I think it was, they did a release called the Green Release, like in the early 50s, where, as an experiment, a bunch of toxic waste was let out of the pipes, and wind took it and carried it through the farmlands of Washington, and it got into grass, and the animals ate it, and it got into the farmlands, and it wasn't, and people were dying and sick and being born with birth defects and animal defects were as well. And it really wasn't until and some journalism found out, like in the 80s, that had happened, and that's what caused it all, which was kind of, I think, blew up in the doors that it's really dangerous there. And that's when the plutonium production stopped, and that's when the class action lawsuits started. So I think for several decades the answer would be no, and I don't think it was until they actually stopped producing the plutonium that it was more public knowledge of the dangers.
It sounds like the stories surrounding 3 Mile Island and the radioactive illnesses that have been documented, and once again by journalism.
I mean, the lawsuit, the Downwinders class action suit. I mean, there's a settlement, and it just got settled, by the way, in the 2000s, so it's not that old. But it's, there's 3,000 to 4,000 members of that class action suit, alleging some sort of, cancer or sickness related to the radiation. So it's pretty severe. Now what you hear to this day are the current workers out there being exposed during the cleanup, and that's where you have all these hundreds of whistleblowers kind of exposing, safety concerns and safety allegations. So back then, it was people getting sick because of that release and the radiation. Now it's people just need to really take care of themselves during this cleanup process, which is going on and on and on.
Did you speak to former workers, local residents, or even whistleblowers while developing your stories?
Yes, I did. I did. I have a lot of people who still work out there, used to work out there, currently live there. Mm-hmm. Luckily I'm from there, and my circle of family and friends are from there. So it wasn't hard to find people to talk to. I didn't, do an undercover, reporting sting, but I did talk to many, many people, and I did a lot of research. And luckily there's a lot of research to find. I mean, you just sit in front of a computer and start Googling the Hanford history, and the books that have been written about it. It's not that hard to get the research,
How do you responsibly combine real tragedies and historical events with fictional supernatural horror?
Well, I think that's the interesting thing. I think that so each one, I've tried to pick an aspect of the nuclear reactor world and what it's like to live there, and then the fun part is for me to kind of add the supernatural twist to it. So, I covered the tragic history with the whistleblowers. I mean, I'm sorry, the Downwinders in the first book, Witchland. But by the way, when I grew up there was a woman that I was told was a witch and had been radiated and cursed, and so that led to Witchland. So it's kind of a witch story, about witchcraft, but it's also, telling the story of the Downwinders. The second book, Snitchland, I researched all the current modern day whistleblowers, and I based it on a real tunnel collapse that happened in I think 2017. And so I turned it into a ghost story, and it was all about the people who have actually perished out there and might still be roaming the streets of Hanford. The third one, I tried to tie it to kind of small town drug epidemics, and they had a big fentanyl bust in the Tri-Cities in Richland, and I turned that into a vampire story. And so now with this one, I did all the research on the animal testing and all the stories of the animals that were, there were thousands of animals at a time kept there with testing. And I've turned this into kind of a revenge of the animals story, where some of that tainted blood from back in the day has made its way into modern hospitals and is creating a new breed of werewolves. So, I try to have fun with it.
Sure.
So I try to tell a funny story and with a little education about what went on, but then I put my own Mulligan supernatural twist on it.
All you need is a character like the Mothman, and away you go.
Yep, exactly.
Witchland brings together radiation, paranoia, ancient forces, and supernatural activity. How do you balance those different elements? Because, you're a juggler, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I love the way that you've brought everything together, and it's just a great concept about a sad story, really, when you realize what the government has done and how these people in Hanford may suffer now and into their later years. So why don't we do this, Tim? Why don't we just take our break now at the bottom of the hour, and we'll be back, and when we continue, more of this fascinating story. And our guest exonation is Tim Mulligan. His website, www.mulliganworld.com. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. until midnight, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, the CanCom Broadcast Network, and, of course, our good friends at your hometown radio, Classic 1220, CFAJ AM, and they stream us around the world on classic1220.ca. Tim Mulligan and I will return discussing these stories, and this is truly a place where fact and fiction meet. Sounds spooky. Sounds real. Sounds like something that you'd hear on CNN. Tim Mulligan, don't go away.
Thank you.
Microphone became my window to the world, where truth and wonder slowly unfurled. Every voice, every soul, every story I knew left a little light.
Visitors passing by, from Ezekiel's wheel to Atlantis, lost the secrets buried deep. The truth has waited centuries for those who dare to seek. They walk among the stars, ancient voices calling, UFOs and
Explanation. Tim Mulligan is our guest. His website is mulliganworld.com. And just a reminder, all the music that you hear here on the X Zone is performed by RAM, and all their music is available at www.rammusic.ca. Tim, is the supernatural in Witchland meant to be taken literally, Or can it also represent trauma, guilt, and buried community secrets?
It's a mix. I think that, I like I said, I like to focus on a different aspect of the site and then base it on a real thing. Like, for instance, in Ditchland, the reason it's called Ditchland is that in my research, I found there's this crazy story that's true of how back in 2007, the workers out there found a buried railroad tanker car in a ditch, in a trench there. And inside of that tanker car were 40,000 tons of animal carcasses, mostly dogs, that had been tested on. And they were supposed to have been buried and then burned, and they were not burned. So they found these full carcasses in plastic. And it just I just couldn't believe it. So then you research it and go back to the 90s, and you had different nuclear sites around the country were doing experiments on beagles because of the DNA of a beagle, which is being a dog lover myself, it was a sad thing to read about, but you can't hide the history. So what would happen was all these nuclear sites were sending the carcasses to Hanford, and Hanford had kind of opened their doors to say, send them to us. And they buried them there in the ground. So that right there was where Ditchland came out of. And I thought, well, what if I go back to that ditch where those were found? And then where the supernatural element could come in is, let me have some animals get some revenge. And so that's where I kind of said, well, let's make this a werewolf story. And so the werewolves, it's kids in town, and they become infected, and they start congregating at this ditch at night and trying to take revenge on folks out at Hanford who had kind of done the testing at the laboratory. So to answer your question, I do a little bit of mix. I like to kind of tell a Twin Peaks-like story of a weird, quirky American town, mix in, the real-life nuclear history and the stories that come with it, and then throw in my own horror and monster bents. So it's a little bit of everything. So it's a true story, a true arc. Every one of the books I've written about is based on a true moment in time or a true aspect of the nuclear industry or Hanford. And then I take it from there and I kind of turn it into a fun and funny, I hope, and scary story about this group, this family who moves there and deal with all of these, are confronted with all of these history and then current day ramifications of the history.
I must tell you, I'm an animal lover as well. And you were discussing that tanker with all those carcasses. It's disgusting. And did anybody pay any consequence for what happened to those animals?
I mean, it was all sanctioned. Back in the day, like in the late 40s when Hanford was newer, they would keep up to 1,000 animals there at a time in an animal farm. And it was a mix of everything from rodents to cats and dogs to a lot of farm animals like cows, sheep, goats, pigs. There's even stories of alligators. In fact, one of my favorite aspects of this research was this stories that hit the news that some radioactive alligators escaped and made their way into the Columbia River. And there's this lore there at Hanford that fishermen in Richland for years would see these like glowing radioactive alligators in the Columbia River, which is, by the way, a river that I grew up swimming in and water skiing on. So, I mean, it is back to the original point. It is sad, and it is a startling, never talked about story, I think with Richland, that all this was happening, and especially with beagles and dogs. Yeah. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say it, but when I grew up there in high school, and we would go out to this building that everyone in town called the Puppy Mill, and that's where high school kids would go drink beers behind. So I think it just became part of your life, and you didn't really know what was really going on, but you just learned to live with it,
How did the people of Hanford and the surrounding areas feel about what happened to the animals and how they were used as guinea pigs? That's just an atrocity that just irks me, because one of the contract jobs I did was the director of communications for the SPCA, and I'm truly one of the biggest animal lovers going, and to hear this story, even though it happened so many years ago, it's just wrong. Yeah. And Tom, do you think that we've learned from those experiences?
I hope so. I mean, I know that they stopped it. I mean, they really scaled it down in the 70s, and they moved it to a smaller lab, which is still there. I was actually went and visited it from the outside, not a tour, but I went and saw it this summer. So I hope so. I don't know. I can't speak for them. But in Ditchland, I kind of made my own story about reconciling with the past, and there's kind of a revenge story of people who worked at the lab and who were really upset by all of this, and how it's kind of spilled over into their kids and the legacy to current day. So I don't know. I would hope so. I think the fact that they don't do it anymore, obviously is a good move, but we can't hide the fact that, it happened.
Tom, I'm going to ask you to take off your author hat and put on your lawyer hat here. And
yeah, great.
Okay. Do you think that communities sometimes protect dangerous secrets instead of confronting the truth?
Yeah, I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, I think there are secrets that I'm sure that they don't want people talking about. I think many government sites are like that, but I think in the nuclear industry, especially, where there's already a giant mega lawsuit at Hanford, and there's been many, many, many other lawsuits. There's law firms now that are just in Washington State that are just 100% dedicated to representing Hanford workers and whistleblowers. So it's an industry. And so I think that, they have to be careful what they say. There's probably a lot of NDAs that are signed out there. And I think one thing I do appreciate, though, is that the history doesn't seem to be as swept away now. If you just go to the Hanford website, even though they're very open about the history, you can now take tours where they're open about the history. And I think that's a newer movement than I was experienced growing up there. So I think now, especially maybe with the way the internet is, and you can find out this stuff pretty easily, I think that they're more open about the history. But yeah, there's things that I'm sure that they would prefer don't come up because there's legal, ramifications. So sure.
As a trained lawyer, did you find that your experience as a trained lawyer came in handy during the investigations or the research that you did for your books?
Yeah, I think being having my legal background, and I went to law school in Washington, and I practiced law for a few years, and then I've been working in human resources for decades now. But I always have that lawyer hat on. So yeah, anytime I do research or read these stories, my mind always goes to the legality, the morality, the ethics of it, the impact of it, the ramifications of it. Who's liable for what? What's the risk? I mean, I'm always thinking that way, unfortunately.
Witchland began as a stage play. What challenges did you face bringing the supernatural story to a live theater audience?
Well, my goal was to create a fun night out for adults that they could go to the theater and just be kind of giddy with terror and kind of laugh in shock. So it's hard. I think that's why you don't see a lot of scary plays. Right now, they're kind of having a moment, and you're seeing more and more scary plays, and that's why I think my current plays are doing pretty well. But it's hard to do. It's hard the supernatural element's tough. The Witchland had to do with witches, and I had various incarnations of witches in the theater, and you have to think about how you're going to do that. You're going to, because it's not a haunted house like you walk through and you see scary things. It's you sit in a seat at a theater and watch this show. So how do you make it somewhat immersive? How do you really make the people nervously scared? It's easy to do a jump scare and have something jump out and everyone screams. That's fun. But how do you sustain that for a whole play where you're really invested in the story, but yet covering your eyes in fright the whole time? And so it's not easy. I've done 3 scary plays now, and each one I've learned what you can and can't do. And it kind of depends on, the budget you have and the appetite for really scaring people, or just making it be more, kind of a horror light, So you have to kind of, I think, know your audience, know your capability, know your theater, and decide how far you want to take it.
I've got about a minute before I have to go to my next break, Tim. And I was wondering if you could tell me what it was like the first time that you saw your play on stage.
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I never thought I would even write a play. So when I wrote my play, it was a little, I was just trying to get it finished. So the fact that I pitched it to some theaters just for fun, and 7 months later or 6 months later, it was getting a full month-long production in San Diego, I was blown away. And so the first time I saw it live, they did such an amazing job. The audience was screaming. It was during COVID. It was coming right out of COVID. So people were dying to go back to the theaters again. And so it was super exhilarating and fun.
Congratulations on all you do. And X Zone Nation, our guest this hour is Tim Mulligan. His website is mulliganworld.com. And Tim and I will be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone on the other side of this short break, as we continue investigating the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here on the CanCom Broadcast Network and your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM, that stream us around the world on classic1220.ca. And don't forget, all the music that you're listening to tonight is exclusive to the X Zone, and it's performed by REM. And let me see, so far we've played Still I Rise in the first segment, second segment, the story behind the music, and the last segment we came in with ancient Starward Walkers. Starward Walkers, cool. And the final song is going to be Lanterns. All this music is available at www.rammusic.ca. Don't go away, X Zone Nation. Tim and I return on the other side of this break. Oh, not very long from now.
In the shadows of the pyramids and the writings on the stone, voices from forgotten worlds still whisper through the unknown. Chariots across the heavens, fire dancing in the sky, where the gods of ancient history just visitors pass. When the world grows quiet and the daylight fades, we drift through the doorway that the moonlight made. Beyond every memory, beyond every fear, dreams paint a picture that only we can hear. They carry our questions on rivers of light, sailing through shadows in the middle of the night. A whisper from tomorrow, a lesson from the past, a fleeting constellation that was never meant to last. Dreams are the lanterns in the dark of the soul, guiding us gently where we're meant to go. Like a compass in the ocean, like a star in the sky, they teach us how to walk, they teach us how to fly. Dreams are the language of the heart.
And welcome back, everyone. Tim Mulligan is my guest this hour. www.mulliganworld.com. I'd just like to share a story with you that Craig just informed me of. He was speaking earlier to Ram, and they were telling Craig that a person heard their song called Beyond the Veil here on this show. And what this lady wanted to know is if she could use that when it was her time to pass on. And when you hear a story like that, where your show has the ability to touch someone's heart, like we touched this lady's heart, and the song that was written, and you know how it was performed by our friends Ram, it's just heart touching, and it makes me feel good that we touched another heart here on the show, and that's all we want to do each and every night is touch one heart. Make the difference in one person's heart. Let them know that they're not alone, that there's always somebody there with you. Whether from this side of the veil or the other side, you're never alone. And to know that we were able to touch this lady where she says, well, when I go, can I play your song, The Veil, at my funeral? And I know it's macabre way to look at it, but it's not really. It's really not. So once again, if you'd like to find out all about the music that is heard here on the show, visit rammusic.ca. And thank you, Craig, for bringing that to my attention. Tim Mulligan is our guest, like I said, mulliganworld.com. How does an audience's immediate reaction affect the experience of presenting psychological horrors on stage, Tom?
Well, yeah. So that's why I think that with a play, if we're fortunate enough to have a couple preview nights to test the things out, because especially with a scary play, you want to see what's going to land and what's going to be too much or not enough. And so the audience reaction is super important. I think that my last play that went to New York, the scary haunted house play, Point Loma, the ending just kind of fell flat. And we had a real scare. We thought it was a big scare moment that was going to knock it, take it all home. And it really didn't work. So I think that the audiences, so then we go back and we tweak it. And the next night I went on opening night and it was amazing. And people screamed and had a great time. So that's why you want to have some preview nights, if you can do a couple test runs.
Sure.
Yeah. And even with the book, same thing. I do some readings. I let people read it in advance and kind of see what their thoughts are. And so we can tweak it while we still can,
Tom, why do you think there's such an interest in the paranormal and paranormal stories, the paranormal tourism industry that's popped up? Why?
I don't know. I just think that there's people like to have fun, like to be scared, especially right now. If you look at some of the movies that are out there that are making, such a buzz, like Obsession and Backrooms and some of those and Sinners, I think it's really horror's having a moment right now. And I think there's something about, like, if you look at the world of Witchland story in Ditchland, it's when you take something that you think is completely ordinary. This is what inspires me, like whether it be a small town America, or a ditch like this was, or a nuclear facility, or just a group of kids riding their bikes, or a group of teenagers getting together and just kind of looking at that and asking what would happen if something really absolutely horrifying were hiding underneath this scene that you're watching. And that's what really inspires me. I think people like that. They like to be nervous and kind of watching from their eyes closed or behind their fingers and not quite knowing what's going to happen. And I think people really have a great time with that nervous energy, and I think that's why horror is one genre that seems to really be, growing and growing and growing.
It certainly is. And I've been told by a number of authors that what they do is, instead of coming out with a novel, they'll create a fictional book because it's easier to put the truth into a fictional book than it is into a novel.
Well, yeah, and especially that's why I'm liking it. And that's why I'm having so much fun with the graphic novel series. I have this amazing graphic artist. His name's Pyrink. He's a Mexican artist. And he can, I map it all out and tell him what I want. And then he can do these beautiful artwork pictures. And the horror can then really happen, visually and immediately on the page. And if we do, like in Ditchland, there's some pretty graphic, werewolf transformations. And those sequences can just be much more visceral than it would be if I was just writing it and then explaining it. So I think the graphic novel just opens up a whole new world for horror and show things that, it'd be hard to show without, the illustrations.
Snitchland, it examines whistleblowers and the personal cost of revealing the truth. Why was that story especially important for you to tell?
Well, that I for many reasons. In my career, I've worked with a lot of whistleblowers, and that's always been interesting to me. I'm always for trying to make the workplace safe and inclusive. However, growing up, one thing I do remember about growing up at Hanford, and I became a young lawyer, was one of my friend's mothers pulled me aside she made me meet in another city We had to go to a park. She had sunglasses on and a scarf, and it was almost like the X-Files. And she was telling me she had this folder of calls, and she thought her phone was being bugged. And her husband used to work at Hanford, and he knew things he wasn't supposed to know. And she was being followed. And I just kind of wrote it off as she was a little off her rocker. Now I look back to that and think, I bet she was right on, and I bet everything she told me was really happening. And so as I wrote Snitchland, I really wanted to focus on modern day Hanford and what it's like for the workers out there now in this cleanup, knowing that many people have, succumbed to the nuclear, the radioactivity. So, and I just started researching it, and there are just hundreds of whistleblower stories at this one site that in this town that I grew up in that I did not know anything about. And then I found out that I had some friends that I went to school with that were whistleblowers. And so I had such a connection to it that I thought it'd be an interesting story to tell. And to be honest with you, I really wanted to tell a ghost story. And so it opened the door to telling a ghost story akin kind of to the movie Ghost, where the ghost comes back and kind of helps solve a mystery. And I really like that idea. So it all kind of came together to tell the story of the plight of the whistleblower, but also put it into a fun supernatural story as well.
Why are whistleblowers so often treated as enemies when all they're trying to do is, maybe trying to protect the public?
Well, I think it gets back to your question earlier about when you asked me about as a lawyer, or, there's things that are not being said directly. And I think that's it. I think that money comes into play and reputation comes into play, and the cost of doing business comes into play, and losing contracts and getting bad publicity and opening the door to other lawsuits. And I think there's a million reasons why some whistleblower stories are shot down and swept under the rug, when maybe what they're whistleblowing is super important and 100% true, but it would just open the door to a whole slew of potential problems for the employer. I think that's why so many times they're just not treated well.
Last night I was, after the show and I got back home, I watched a movie on Netflix called, it was all about the Boeing industry and how whistleblowers there tried to tell Boeing that there were a lot of problems, and management wouldn't listen because it was all about making money. It wasn't about personal safety or the safety of those who flew on the aircraft. It was all about money. And these whistleblowers, my God, hats off to them. In fact, one took his own life because of the way he thought the company would treat him, even though he was no longer with the company, treat him because of his courage to be a whistleblower.
Yeah, and you take that story and add into it, deadly toxic waste and radioactivity. It equates to a big mess.
It sure does. Your forthcoming Switchland, involves the unexplained spacecraft, disturbing transformations, and a government conspiracy. Ooh, I love it. What can you reveal about it without spoiling the story for us?
Oh gosh, I've never been in the past, even though I love horror, I've never really gravitated toward the alien and extraterrestrial and world, even though I like some of the movies and stuff. But then I heard about some of the UFO sightings that the governments had, especially around nuclear reactors. Mm-hmm. And then as I researched, I realized how many happened in my hometown and at Hanford. So it was an awesome thing to research, because I was able to I got actual, government reports of sightings and chasing UFOs in airplanes, and then get the reports being redacted and being written and changed in the stories. And I realized all these stories happened in a short period of time at Hanford, and they've happened even more so over the years. So it was eye-opening. It was fun to study, to research, and I think it's made for a great way to tie up this whole series. And so it's called Switchland. It involves the switching of places with from some alien forms to some of the residents of Richland back in the late 40s when Hanford started. And so it's a fun twist on actual government reports that I'm recreating in my book.
And that comes out next year, right?
Yeah, that's in. It's written. The artwork's being done. So Ditchland, the werewolf story, is going to come out on September 15th, It just went available for pre-sale on Amazon this week. And then the fifth and final, that ties everything together, it's called Switchland. That'll come out early 2027.
Tim Mulligan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Always a great pleasure talking to you, Tim. I wish you much more success. And I look forward to the next time you join us here in the X Zone to talk about your latest book that involves UFOs, government conspiracies, and all the weird and wonderful things that we talk about here Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight. Take care of yourself, Tim.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's my great pleasure, my friend. And X Zone Nation, I'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast station and studios at the CanCom Broadcast Network and on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM, and they stream us at classic1220.ca. Don't go away.
That was never meant to last.